So, hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation With. My name is John Lunn, aka Jonnychipz, and in this video series, we talk all things cloud with experts and advocates from right across our industry, covering a wide variety of topics from skills and careers through to technical overviews and soft skills. So, whether you're watching this on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, or LinkedIn, thanks so much for tuning in. It's really appreciated. Please do take part in the chat below. Drop us a comment, a like, and a subscribe would be absolutely awesome. Okay, so my next guest, he is an Azure MVP at the moment. He's a Microsoft certified trainer, a blogger, a public speaker, and he's got a huge passion for cloud computing in general. So joining me from across the pond in Rochester, New York, I'm excited to welcome my next guest on In Conversation With as Mr. Chris Gill. So, how you doing, Chris? Thanks so much for joining me. How's things?
I'm doing great, John. Thanks for having me. Humbled to be part of this, and humbled to be one of the names on this wonderful list that you've just been creating over the past few years with this community effort. So, thanks again.
Oh, not at all, Chris. I mean, it's all my pleasure. I know, we're having a quick chat there just off camera, but no, honestly, it's great that, thank you for joining me because it's really, I put these videos together to speak to awesome community folk, people across the industry, and it's just great. I love having these chats, and thank you for reaching out and wanting to jump on and have a quick chat. And I'm, we've got a couple of topic areas now set aside that we're going to delve into over the next half an hour or so. But look, before we get into that, Chris, do you want to give yourself a bit of a broader introduction? Maybe talk a little bit about your, potted career history. Let us know what you're up to at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. And anybody who knows in the community, I'd love to talk about this stuff. But humble upbringings, born and raised in Pennsylvania. I moved to New York. I found my wife in Rochester, New York. I actually moved here trying to hunt down a job. So for anybody who doesn't realize that piece of it, but I looked around, tried to find, something that was just entry level. I was C++, robotics in college. I went to St. Bonaventure University, kind of dabbled with a bunch of things. Came here to Rochester, tried to find something entry level, found a job at a law firm just because they were paying more than everybody else. So pick up the phone, handle some tickets. I'm like, it's a great gig. I can do work in the daytime, off hours, go party at night, whatever. I was just right out of college, have some fun.
Yeah.
And it became something way more from that. So I was there about 6 months or so. They had a lot of tools. So law firms, a ton of different tools to do their jobs. Realized that they had an older portal technology at that time. So they were using Plumtree Portal. Came in, learned how to basically, take a look at what they were doing, recommended SharePoint. And from that point forward, career has just taken off. I kind of learned how to do, the multi-tiered application approach. I worked a little bit in their dev group. I went to the infrastructure group. They say the dark side, we have cookies. I went to the dark side. I definitely got some of the cookies, kind of moved back to the what they have now as a research and development group. But all the while, just kind of building from, what I learned in SharePoint, a lot of on-premises with Active Directory and identity management, SQL, and translating that into now, Microsoft 365 and Azure and how to just handle those same services, either in hybrid or purely cloud fashion.
No, that's really cool because, a lot of those technologies that you mentioned, it sounds very similar to kind of, I can relate to it. It's very much a Microsoft-centric background, it sounds like that you've had during your career. So, how did you find that transition, Chris, when, things started turning more to cloud with 365 and eventually Azure? How was that kind of journey from kind of coming from that on-prem world into this new cloud world for you? Any kind of points you'd like to pick out about that?
Yeah. So I know, at least for us, again, the business of, any financial services, law, legal, tech, that transition is slow. It is slow. And a lot of that is because of, just hard governance rules. When it comes down to it, it's like you need to make sure the data is protected, make sure that devices are protected, make sure that that full, circle of governance and a good, I guess, approach to, excellence for, just getting devices out, getting not only your employees' data, but the client's data as well protected. It's been an interesting transition for sure. I'll be honest, we're still, at least what I've seen, both at our company and others, a lot of folks are still in that transition. They're somewhere in the middle. Even though, pandemic, we're still in that kind of pandemic mode, but there's still a lot of folks that are really trying to either move some last workloads or really just, really in the middle of it, getting started, kind of going through that progression.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I've had conversations with colleagues and friends in the community as well about this kind of subject area of. I think the pandemic really shunted a lot of businesses into kind of almost scrapping the whole bureaucracy of projects and just going, look, we kind of need this. Let's just get on with. I mean, were you kind of in that mode with your business, Chris, at the time when the pandemic hit?
I'll be honest. I'll throw out the all the big names. We were very much on right up into 2019, 2020. We were a big Cisco shop, so a lot of Cisco hardware. Looking to WebEx and using that for communications platform. The pandemic came. It was March, and next thing you know, it's like April, May, June. We're integrating and setting up Azure AD SSO with Zoom. We're setting up with, name your whatever, Microsoft Teams, whatever else, just getting all these communication platforms. So for us, at least for our business, we didn't just have one. We were managing 3, 4, maybe 5. So we're still kind of in that mode. We're really talking a lot more about Teams, Microsoft Teams now, seeing that, it's just became such a great competitor, with the underpinnings of how that collaborative environment, that one space, that, the security features all kind of pinned together. There's been a lot of talks about that. So where our path goes, we don't yet know, but we are, kind of looking at that. And I'm sure other customers and other businesses are running in that same thing of, all right, we had to do this because our business administrator said we had to. And we stood up Zoom, we stood up whatever else. So it's interesting. It's really interesting to see, I think folks are now coming back to say, can we unify those workloads? Can we bring them back? Maybe cut some of the costs, cut some of the, I guess, just, placement of these things across multiple platforms.
That makes a lot of sense with things I'm seeing, to be honest, Chris. It's like you say, the pandemic hit and it's almost kind of like all hands on deck. Let's get this technology rolled out. And, rightly or wrongly, I mean, at the time where you're faced with that, just getting people up and running, undoubtedly there are corners cut, like you say, with governance, maybe some security. And there's no shame in admitting that, because, look, we kind of didn't know the position really that we were in. So there were best intentions. And I'm seeing the same thing now. Lots of companies are kind of, now we're kind of starting to get back to that element of normality, in the sense that we're able to get out and about a bit more, and business as usual is kind of, almost similar to what we remember pre-pandemic. I mean, I suppose it's that opportunity for businesses to review what they've done over the last 2 years and kind of retrofit some governance, some security, right, and just make that a little bit more robust and increase the posture of those kind of bits, I guess, in their platforms. Is, do you see that as where you're seeing things at the moment as well, Chris?
Absolutely do. And again, just knowing it, like where we're, my current employer, where we're trying to position, where we're trying to move. It's interesting because I would say a few years ago, security wasn't really, we all talk about security, but it wasn't really the forefront of the project. It's like, what's the business value? What's the, what is everyone getting out of this thing, or this, service that we're standing up? And at least for us, we very, very aware coming at it from we're going to do a security review from the get-go, make sure that we, cross all the T's, dot all the I's, make sure we're good to go from that perspective. Just give a good risk assessment of, the tool itself. At least our approach to it, not necessarily from a third party or from just documentation purposes, but, kind of building our own, almost a framework, like an architected framework from that perspective.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, Chris, I know just before we hit record, we spoke about kind of your area of the kind of things that you're focused with at the moment, and it looks like you're incredibly broad in the terms of the technology areas that you're looking at with the businesses that you're working with at the moment. I mean, let's switch tracks a little bit now and kind of talk about how do you keep up to date with the technologies? Because when you look at 365 and the plethora of productivity tool sets, security features, device management bits and pieces, and then you kind of factor in Azure with this whole kit bag of cloud fabric tools and services and features. What does that look like from your perspective, Chris? And kind of how do you navigate through all of that?
Yeah. I'm going to pick on one word. You said focus, and I'm like, man, I've never heard that said about me before. So I appreciate that. Thank you. But no, seriously, it's been a task. I would say, when Azure really first launched right around 2009, 2010, right? Publicly, there was just a few services. I say, virtual machine storage, whatever else, and identity management was there, of course. And now we're talking a couple hundred services, and that seems to grow. And I think the more, I wouldn't say it's problematic, the more challenging piece of it now is just keeping up with the renames and the the integration of, it's like, all right, this was something Sentinel before, and now it's Microsoft Sentinel, or it's Office 365 something, and now it's Microsoft Purview, blah 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 blah, blah.
I was going to say, I just noticed that all of those governance things have been renamed lately, haven't they?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you.
So of course, no joke, right before we started recording, I was in a meeting, and we dropped the word Microsoft Purview, and my director's like, what is that? Wait, what's this? I just heard about it. I'm like, yeah, that's new. I just heard about it too, as of a week or so ago. Yes, maybe we as MVPs know things a little bit more in advance, but the reality is that a lot of these, and rightfully so, are kind of starting to integrate. So Microsoft knows that there's been this disparity of the tool sets, and they're starting to kind of bring that together, especially with Purview now, where you go into compliance.microsoft.com, and where it was a few years ago, even just 4 or 5 different tools, you now have your full compliance suite of tools. You've got data protection, you've got your policies, you've got all kind of stuff. To answer the question about how I kind of keep up to date on it, honestly, I learned very long ago, and I'm a little bit of a read it guy, but I'm also got to have my hands on with it. I was the guy that would stand up virtual machines just to, see them tick, kind of feel, what they do and whatever else. The same thing goes for the cloud. I've got multiple tenants, some that are just freemium. It's like Microsoft provides about $100, $150 free for most things, to go out and just learn, play with. Yeah, not all the services you can get your hands on. But, from that perspective, I found great value in just kind of tinkering. It's like following, instructions from blogs from Microsoft Learn, or from any of our videos and stuff that community is creating, to go and kind of play along, read along, play along, build along with that, and just get your hands on it. But yeah, I would argue that it's getting tougher. It's getting tougher by the moment to, one, just find focus on something, and two, to really keep up to date with all the rebrands and the new feature sets that are coming through. I will say this: the one nice thing that I have seen is a lot of the new things that are being rolled out, previews. They do have either little information buttons, or worst case scenario, can always go out and take a look at the Azure updates site too. Just a long thread of here's everything. It's searchable. I'd like to focus on a more of a security or Sentinel or Purview approach. I can go out, search for that term. It'll return back all the results, and I can quickly just start taking a look at latest updates, maybe some of the historical documentation. But yeah, that's kind of how I keep up to date from that perspective.
That's a good tip. I mean, that's one that I use myself, actually. The whole Azure updates thing is that even just taking a look at that on a, just once a week, just to kind of have a quick skim through the last weeks worth of updates. Personally, what I always find is that even if you just read them, skim reading through the updates, it kind of, some stuff does stick up there, so you're like, when
Right.
you're next having a conversation, not all of it, let's face it, not all of it is going to be relevant to you in your day job or for a project that you're working on. But for me, it's always, I like to do it because when you're having those broader conversations, you can go, right, yeah, I remember there was something up there, even if you've got to go back and quickly look it up and just to refresh your memory. But yeah, I agree. And I think that the majority of the people that I've spoken to about this in this video series agree that the amount of work to try and keep up to date with the movements of tech at the moment is phenomenal. And I don't know, do you think as an industry, do you think we're trying to figure that out, Chris? I mean, I don't want to make it like a leading question, but to me, it feels like we're still trying to figure out what our roles are now in this new cloud world, because there's a lot of overlap and things like that. How do you see it?
I certainly do, and I almost knew you were going to ask this question. I felt like we were trending towards it. So it's interesting that I would say about a year or so, I go into Azure, and for anybody who, we could build an ARM template or bicep template, or do code as a service, any of that stuff, right? There still are folks though that have never been in those environments, so I'm finding myself spending a lot of time in the portal with my teams. They're still upskilling, they're still getting their feet wet or getting up to speed on what we're trying to achieve. I find it amazing that we're now seeing a lot of crossover as well. And I say crossover, like I could go into Azure SQL database or an instance, and I'm seeing all the stuff that I'm used to, identity access management, security features, all this other stuff. But I'm also seeing integrations for other platforms, Power BI. I'm seeing Power Apps. I can immediately just click on it and say, I want to create a Canvas app, and I want to start building a dashboard or whatever else. So that's starting to blur as well, and it's been wild. It's been interesting, and I think a lot of us that saw from the beginning how things have been going, are able to follow along. For some of the newcomers, they're like, wow, this is really overwhelming. Like, how can I really just focus in on this one thing? I wanted to get out and do this one or two things. How do I do that? Efficiently without really getting caught up in the weeds. So
I know what you're trying to say there. It's like, you focus on one thing, you give it that bit of attention, but then there's this list of things that you have to do for your day job that will take priority. Then by the time you go back to that bit, it might have moved on or it might have changed. So, and I don't think we've got the answer yet. As an industry, that's my take on it. Is that I spoke with somebody not too long ago on this show and internally where I work with, graduates who are coming into industry for the first time, and it's almost like, how do they see it? Because I suppose, if you're of a certain generation, maybe you've been working in the industry for a little while, you've got baggage, you've got that technical debt of knowing how things used to be, and I guess we're always trying to compare how things were in the on-prem world to the cloud world, and it's a completely different kettle of fish. Yeah, I mean, there are so many new skills that we all have to learn, and I sit there and wonder, how does somebody new into the industry, is it overwhelming, or do they come into the industry and just kind of, I don't know, because they don't have that debt of how things used to be done, is it easier to kind of, I don't know, it's really a cool topic area. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Chris.
Yeah, and you mentioned we'll talk maybe a little bit later about some of the other community efforts, but I know one person who has just been phenomenal. She's come into the environment. So her name is Azure McFarland. She's on Twitter. Anybody who isn't following her, give her a follow. But she was previously, kind of near and dear to my heart. So I actually started out with not computer science, but I was looking at more of chemistry and biology. So I was training to be a biochemist in college. Walked away from it. And, and you can guess where I'm going, talking about career switching. It's like, from that perspective, I was switching topics. I was switching from, biology and chem to computer science, different sciences involved. But, she was working in that industry for a while. So, in biochem, just wanted to try and do something different. She got into Power Apps. she's huge proponent of Power Apps, doing Power Apps school, doing all this other stuff. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think a lot of us, and even myself, just kind of thinking about it, it's like, well, I've got all these great skills. I did the on-prem stuff. I'm doing some of the cloud and whatever else. It's like I don't really have focus in a lot of areas, but I'm good, and we're all really good in a bunch of different areas. If we were ever to pivot, what would that pivot be? And what would that maybe career switch be? And again, it's like she had that experience from biochem, going to Power Apps, and now the place that she's working at, they're like, hey, we need help at a health customer, or whatever. She was able to walk in. She can already speak that language. She can take those skills that she already learned, and the same goes for us. It's like all the skills that we built over the years, take that and use it towards something else. So it's really interesting now, because I look at it and we use the words overwhelming a couple times. Like, man, I'd love to get to something that was a little more focused. And, can I take one area of all this stuff? Yeah, I still have the skills. I can troubleshoot DNS and all this other stuff. That's great. But could I walk into place and do Power Apps, or do some other, some other component, but still be able to guide conversations on governance and how to set this up, how to secure it, how to, kind of get those workloads, in between. So it's a really interesting world that we live in right now, to be honest.
I do not disagree, and I think I know on your Twitter page you've got that hashtag Learn It All, and I think that's a really cool thing to think about, because there was this concept of, I think, if you're a consultant or an architect in a particular field, you kind of almost looked at, or you were almost looked at, as to be the font of all knowledge. Look, we're paying a premium for your expertise. You should know it all. And certainly over the last few years, I think that the barriers have started to come down, where there's not this egotistical person that sits there and goes, I know everything, pay me lots of money and I'll tell you the answer, because nobody can know that. But that phrase of learn it all, I think, is still quite valid, because it's almost like there's an expectation that, you hear about being T-shaped or N-shaped or M-shaped, where you have those deep dive SMEs. But I think, are we transforming to become more almost specialist generalists? We're going back to this generalist role, almost not of our choosing, because the cloud has kind of blurred these lines for us, and it's almost like we're expecting to. And there are some key areas of demarcation if you want to break it up in technology terms, but it just feels a little bit like that at the minute, Chris, to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's like we always, I think we joke too, I know I've joked in circles, friends of, it's like everybody was on premises. We move workloads to clouds. It's like, are they going to come back at some point? I really hope not. But
we do joke. I think I use the same joke about it being cyclical. Everything, what goes around comes around, kind of thing. But I mean, we can't get it. It's a great place to work. Certainly, to keep us on our toes and keep us learning. Absolutely. I mean, Chris, let's switch tracks a little bit to community. We mentioned it earlier on. You're an MVP yourself from Microsoft. Let's start off on that ball game, because I know community obviously is near and dear to your heart. What do you get out of community, and what does it mean to you, Chris?
Yes, I know I usually say a lot of words. So I'm going to say one word to answer it, and then we'll talk about it. But mentoring, for me, mentoring has been huge. To get the MVP award, it was very humbling, and I still question. I shouldn't, but I think we still all have a little bit of that imposter of, why us? Why,
Sure.
What do we do? What's special that we bring? I thought about that long and hard, and I think, at least for me, one of the biggest things is just that mentoring approach. I've realized it took me a little bit longer than most, but I've realized, at least in the past, somewhere between the past 5-10 years, that a lot of stuff that I learned, it's not necessarily what I learned, it's how I learned it, and how I could kind of teach that to other people. Whether it's, just upright training, or just talking, and I say training or soft skills, but it doesn't have to be just tech. It could be this. I can tell you right now, 5-10 years ago, I would not have been comfortable doing this. Just getting into video, standing up, talking, being on the internet or whatever else, it just wasn't me. Or I didn't think it was me at that time. Had a little bit of a wake-up call in 2019. It was great. Got on stage and did something I never thought I would do. But again, it was because of folks that were kind of mentoring me, that saw something in me and said, hey, these are other skills you can try and build, fine tune. So from that perspective, some of the community efforts that I've recently been involved with, one of my mentees has gained so much from the MVP program and people like us that she is now like vehemently going and kind of creating her own effort for the community and saying, I want to find folks that are underprivileged, that don't have skill sets, or are coming to the United States that may have worked in Nigeria or Ethiopia or whatever else, what have you. They're, I guess, coming into the U.S. don't have the work papers, don't have the immediate, sets to say, hey, I can go and do that same type of job here in the United States. We just recently, over the past month, kicked off, a user group for that community effort. And it's been fantastic. The first group, we had about 40 people show. We had 4 speakers, and we all just talked about, where folks came from, kind of that, from grassroots. How did I get here? How did I get to my point in the career? What were the stumbling blocks? But I realized that a lot of folks just need to hear that story, need to find something that's relatable, and really just be a little more open with it and say, can I find other network contacts? Can I find other people that are willing to help? So that's been huge. It's been fun. My heart is so full over those events, and so much so there's another in planning user group that so you said across the pond. We're going north this time, so between Rochester and Toronto. It's another friend of mine. We're going to put together what's called Come Cloud with Us. So another kind of just like this, talking back and forth about, we'll pick a topic, some questions, and just cover some things that folks either don't know, tips and tricks, or how to skill up pretty quickly in that area of it. But again, from that perspective, it's been just overwhelming, the feedback, and to see what time and effort you put into others, for them to take and run with that and just carry that torch on. My heart is full. So sometimes brings tears to your eyes, but it's wonderful to see those folks just run and give back to the community too. So,
I mean, that's an awesome story, Chris. And I think it's kind of testament to the hard work and effort that you might not feel it. And like you say, when you say that one word about mentoring, it's about giving back, and helping others that may, it might not be anything other than that you just want to learn. But the fact that you're talking about there helping others that are in, disadvantaged positions, I think is equally as wonderful to see that you're putting that time and effort into those kind of initiatives as well. Because I think that's what it comes down to, doesn't it? Is that we've all, doesn't matter who you are, what you do, what you've got to say, we've all got things that we can learn from each other. And I think just having that that positive can-do, slightly, only a hint of passion, just that willingness to go out and do good for others. Kind of, I guess that's why, I echo exactly the same thing. When I got awarded the MVP, it was almost like, look, it's a massively humbling experience, but you can't quite, well, why me? I'm not really, I'm just kind of doing what I do, or doing what I feel comfortable with, I guess, that passion that you've got there for technology. But yeah, I mean, congratulations. And we'll get some links, Chris. Send me through the links, and I'll make sure they're in the video below to the user group, so people can jump on and sign up and look how to find things. But I mean, so you're talking about that. Have you got anything else coming up at the moment in community? I mean, what kind of things are you, up to over the next few weeks?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big things, for anybody who doesn't know, the Azure Global event's coming up here beginning of May. Doing a
we might have just missed it when this video goes out, Chris, but it'll be but yeah, beginning of May. Might have just passed, but I'm sure all the content is there available though.
Okay. That's a good point. So yeah, Aside from that, I know, again, there are going to be a couple user group meetings that we're kicking off. There are a couple sessions that I still have CFPs, calls for proposals out. But aside from that, just I would say this, now that it's official. I am working on writing a book for
Oh,
PACT. So the AZ 801 that just
oh,
released
nice.
for, that hybrid cloud management. I'm going to be working on that over the next at least a couple months into next year. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome. That's well
I
done.
feel
Yeah,
bad
good.
for my fingers, but
Do you know what? The thought of writing a book sends shivers down my spine. I wouldn't even like to consider how you actually get started because I'm such a. But no, I
yeah,
mean, kudos, Chris. I mean, for getting onto that. Do you know? I sat that exam only a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it was a really great exam. Really great exam. So
yeah,
yeah, really, because it's back to, I guess. I don't like saying people of our generation, but those people who have dealt with a lot of on-premise over the years and that legacy
right.
and hooking that into the Azure platform, that hybrid approach, isn't it? So really cool
Yeah.
areas.
Well, and I'm thinking about it too. The reason why it really caught my attention was back to some of the conversations we had, where I feel that there's going to be a lot of newcomers that are just like, hey,
Mm,
I'm going to jump in, I'm going to do the cloud, I'm going to do everything in AWS, Azure, whatever. Um, but you got to understand the beginnings. You're going to walk
mm,
into clients, you're going to walk into companies that still have a lot of these underpinnings. They're going to have servers, old archaic workloads, or maybe not archaic workloads. That's how they get business done. But you're going to have to be able to identify those. And I'm hopeful that some of the stuff they put in this book will help everybody just skill up and get up to speed in that area.
yeah, it's like I say, I think you're right. What we just talked about, that kind of, it's the foundations, I guess, to a certain extent, with a lot of businesses that are running Microsoft, Active Directory, the domain, the identity platform, the directory services. It's those. If you and there aren't any other exams or certification tracks in
No,
Microsoft that address specifically those technologies. ADFS, Active Directory domain services. That the on-prem version,
certificate
the Azure,
services.
yeah,
Yeah.
certificate services, absolutely. So, yeah, and really excited to see that, Chris. You'll have to keep us posted. I'll retweet that out, and when you get that. So, have you got some time frames in mind for that at the moment, Chris, or is it just still working those things out?
So I definitely have, working with a publisher, we definitely have a plan. I believe it's going to be out in the beginning of next year. So just
Yeah.
look for it then. If by some good graces I get it done early, then it'll be out earlier, and we're all off the hook in the earlier time frame. But
Yeah. Oh no,
it'll be
well,
exciting.
congratulations for landing that gig. And kudos. I'm sure you're going to get there, and good luck with the writing on that, Chris, because
Thank you.
that's no mean feat. I think that's
No,
certainly something to be. Well, it gives you a bit of focus time, if nothing else.
you're right.
Chris, look, it's been absolutely awesome talking to you. Thank you for coming on and being my guest on this episode. But there's always this one big question I like to ask all the guests when they come on this show. And it's really one of these big open-ended questions, just to get your opinions and your take on the industry. But where do you think we're headed, Chris? We talked about the fast-paced change of technology and how much we're learning at the moment. We've talked about a few cool tech areas. But, from your perspective, where are we going? What are the next big bets in tech from your perspective, Chris?
Yeah, great question as always. And I have a few answers. I'm going to pick on one and try to just focus and hone in on that one. But I really, I always look at like, where are we going with securing these workloads? We want to lift and shift. We want to pick up. We want to manage things that are maybe on premises still better. I know you mentioned earlier a few folks, they talked about Microsoft Defender, and we can do that in the cloud. We can do it on premises. But I really am more kind of focused around and looking at, where is Microsoft Sentinel kind of going and trending towards tools like that, where,
Mm,
I'll be honest, it's like my current org, it took us a while. It took us a while to get an on-premises, SIM SOAR environment set up to really receive events and, kind of monitor and alert and do all this good stuff. That took a while. And I say a while, probably a year or two. most folks, most good organizations, and even if it's a managed service provider, it's like we can get the a Sentinel environment set up in a couple weeks, maybe a month, a little over a month, and it's fully functional. There's tweaking involved, but looking at all the integrations, I was blown away just last week going out and taking a look at taking workbooks, different pieces of Microsoft Sentinel, and saying I have a workload maybe from I'd say like Cisco product, maybe Cisco Meraki. Can I quickly integrate and start pulling in logs, do log ingestion, use that as a data source, get it set up and ready to go? Can I look out to Proofpoint and do that same thing? What other tools? CrowdStrike, potentially, that I could go and start surfacing those things up. So, I know Microsoft would love hearing us say, everything's a Microsoft world. Not everybody's in that camp. They have other tools maybe at play currently. But seeing that all come to one unified place is awesome. I think that that's just going to continue to grow over time. And, towing a little bit of the line of like, yeah, there's still a lot of, we still need an engineer. We still need folks going out there. But where does it really trend with adding some of the AI components to it, adding some of the machine learning components to it? And when ready, what do we do with any of the quantum computing pieces too, to say, man, this is an immediate response. It's I've seen this happen all over the place, and this type of traffic is immediately blocked. It's not I got to wait 10 or 15 minutes or even an hour.
Do you know what? I think security is one of those areas we know, from working in the industry, that it's such an important area across any kind of tech business in terms of what's going on. You're one of the first people to bring up that kind of SIEM source system as being a prevalent thing into the future. But I can't help but agree. I think there's certainly cool things going on with Sentinel from what I've seen. I'm by no means a security expert in that space, but even because I think you're talking about the connectors there, how we can hook in third-party products and services and physical hardware and ingest the logs. One of the things I saw as well is just purely by, even for hardware that's not supported in that connector kind of manner, we can set up a syslog server and then ingest all the logs from a syslog. So it's such a huge thing. Like you say, then there's that tweaking process and making sure that we can read the logs in an appropriate manner and use the platform to kind of correlate those alerts or those events, I guess, isn't it? But that's a great kind of observation there, Chris, and certainly something for people to think about working in cyber. Well, of course, Microsoft have just released that new exam now as well with the, I think it's in beta, the SC100, which is the expert security exam.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, that touches on those
I
areas.
almost sat that exam this past week, and I chickened out. So.
Yeah, I think I saw an email pop up. So, shan't I? No, I think there's still a lot of gaps in my Sentinel being one of them for me personally. I think it's such a large project. I think the setup and configuration is one thing that I think is reasonably intuitive on that front. But I think then getting the most out of it, learning KQL to a good level of proficiency, run books and all of that good stuff, isn't it?
Workspace. So workspace design and security, I would say the number one thing surrounding that. Because we can pick up on the KQL pieces pretty easily, but man, if you don't design your workspaces or workspace correctly and secure it properly, you're in for a world of hurt. So
yeah, exactly. So I know there's some great learning resources out there to kind of learn at a very deep level things around Sentinel. So it's worth going off and having a look. But yeah, I think you might be right there, Chris. I think in terms of certainly one to keep an eye on, Sentinel and the ecosystem of Microsoft security certainly is growing and becoming a little bit more and more encompassing in terms of that physical landscape as well as the software side of things.
Right.
Chris, this has been a super fun chat. Huge thanks for being such an awesome guest and coming on and spending your time to say hello.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
No, anytime. I was going to say, are there any last parting words that you'd like to say, or are we good?
I think we're good. Again, thank you. This has been fantastic. So,
no, the pleasure's all mine, Chris. Thanks for being an awesome guest. And keep in touch. No doubt we'll catch up across social media. And yeah, thank you for being an awesome guest. Until next time, bye for now, Chris.
All right, take care.
Cheers, Chris.